Are we ready to go? First of all, the truly important item, in about half an hour there will be food. Pizza will be arriving. We welcome back Jonathan Rodriguez, who is here. For those of you who don't know John, tough. Find out from somebody who was mostly, no, actually, John was here, a computer science PhD student for quite some time, and was one of the people we really cherish here at the GI, which means has to say that he interacted with other people and had lots to say and lots to do. We had a great time when you were here, and then you did that truly annoying thing and went off and got a job. And, yeah, we can't afford that sort of thing, all right? And working with Felix and Paul of VR, you can tell more about VR, the VR production company in Montreal, and brings the VR expertise, all kinds of interesting things, and started to write a really interesting blog as well. I don't know if you're going to be referring to that, but we welcome you back to the Games Institute, and we look forward to hearing all the things you've learned since you've left, mostly about Montreal and winter. Thank you. Welcome back.
All right. Yeah, was that okay?
And thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon.
You social cued the clapping. Good job. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is probably going to be the least researchy talk you may have all year, but that's okay. Sometimes doing something other than research is a good idea. Just saying. Okay. Anyway, so what have I been doing? I've been in Montreal. I've been working for a startup company called Felix and Paul, who does VR films. So, ta-da! Here's our logo. I'm not actually here in any sort of official capacity. This is a completely unofficial talk. I stole this from the website. It's fine. Let's continue. So what is Felix and Paul? Felix and Paul is a hybrid creative and technology company. Now, this kind of creative technology company thing has been sort of a fad lately. Every technology company these days wants to be like, yeah, we're creative too. Well, it really depends what you mean by creative. By creative here, we mean they do things other than just coding. There's like some visuals happening. They're a VR film production company, which in their fifth year of operation, which was a little strange to me at first, because I'm thinking, how do you even do a film in VR? And then I found out, very, very carefully and with a lot of work, as it turns out. So what do I do personally? Now, this is just kind of the set of things I kind of fell into when I got there, because the particular job role that I was hired for was for an application developer generalist, which basically means you go in there and you're sort of okay at doing a lot of different things, which in this case was true. So I ended up doing a lot of user interface, user experience kind of stuff. So systems programming, like, you know, when you click something, what happens? There's code that actually says what happens. If you want to trigger a little animation or border or splash some text somewhere, you know, that there's programming behind that. That was mostly in C++. I decided to tag the languages up here for those of you who are interested in that sort of level of technical detail. RML is a kind of nasty variant of HTML that it works for certain reasons, and I'll talk about that later, but it's not always pleasant to work with. I ended up doing a lot of localization and subtitles. So you want to present this thing in another language, which means that all the texts that you show, and you may want to show subtitles also, have to be in the language that you're sending this experience to. So that has to be selectable and things like that. I've also been involved in tools and file integrations and plugins. So we say, all right, this process that we have here is arduous. We want to make a tool to help us work through something faster. You know, comb through a bunch of files and, you know, tell us something about them. One of the tools I did was related to the localization, where we have a bunch of different files, you know, a set of files for each language that we translate into, and just a simple question like, what things have not yet been translated in this project? and that turns out to be a difficult thing, a very arduous task to answer by hand. So, you know, I'm like, okay, I better just go and write a tool to do this, and that's part of the job. I've also been actively involved in process improvement. One of the things that I did when I came there was the process that they had in place. It was taking a long time for me to get any fixes from other developers. So I'm started complaining about this, and I'm like, hey, we should really think about, so we have all these branches of code in GitHub. We should rethink our branching strategy and how we're validating this, and how other people are pulling and pushing changes to code to try and get faster results, because it was kind of frustrating for things to be slow. So stuff like that, and you know, the development team there is fairly small, and they were very interested in this idea of, you know, how do we kind of work better, because there's a process involved whenever you collaborate with other people, and it's just kind of, well, how do we make sure that the right information gets to the right people at the right times? And when you're in a chaotic startup environment that's growing, that's a surprisingly hard thing to do. So yeah. So what do other people do? So it's not just programmers. We've got a team that designs and constructs cameras. Why? Well, the reason is, when they first started this company, there weren't any VR camera setups that could do what they wanted. So they're like, well, I guess we'll just have to make our own. So now that's a department there where they have a group of people that design and assemble these VR camera rigs, and there's some embedded software programming that goes along with that to control the rigs and get all of the camera images stored and back out and all that sort of business. There's a post-production visual effects department and audio, can't forget about audio. And so basically they've got to get all of these images that coming from this camera, and they've got to be stitched together, they've got to be patched up, because what the thing that the cameras record is, you don't show that directly. There's a lot of work that has to be done to get it visually. Yes?
Are these cameras shooting full 360 and stereoscopically?
Yes.
Wow, okay. That's
yeah.
What cameras, eh?
Yes, full 360 stereoscopic. That's what they're doing. So yes, I can give you an example of that. So the audio is also spatialized. It's full 360 audio. So you know, you turn your head and the sounds seem to be coming from the right place. There's people who do data pipeline integration software tools. So all of this information, all of this video, all of this audio has to be managed and stored and processed somewhere. There's a giant storage network that they've got there to handle all the terabytes of maybe they're up to petabytes of data. I'm not sure. It's big. Those videos are just to give you an idea. They're shooting. They've been shooting a lot of like 4K type videos, which is you know, you get these big pictures, and then one for every eye, and you know, it just adds up to a lot. Anyway, the bit that I personally work in is in the application software engine stuff. So I'm one of the guys that goes in and does some of the programming. One of the challenging bits about this is we're cross-platform. Like it's got to work on Windows with the Rift. It's got to work on Gear VR with like a billion different phones. It's got to work on the Oculus Go. It may have to work on the Vive. It may have to work on the Windows Media device. So that is a major challenge in and of itself, just to keep everything running and to keep it working across all of these different devices. And it's a major headache. I think the results are worth it. But there you go. And then there's quality assurance, customer support. The job of the quality assurance people is, I produce this code, yes, it's working, and they're like, okay, it's great, it's done, and then it goes to quality assurance, and they're like, well, you're not done yet. We found if we click on this thing and this thing and this thing, then it crashes, or you know, it does. We do this weird thing you weren't expecting, and in this this random text shows up in a weird place, or we're not getting this option appearing, or stuff like that. So so we have to go back and fix these bugs. And it was a little bit of customer support because we post something on the Oculus store and they're like, it won't work with my phone, or they have some issue, and they try to be proactive about helping solve the customer's problems, not just for the customer, but so that we can fix any problems in the software that other people may be having. Oculus Store, that's a strange one. Like, I was reading, one day I just randomly decided, okay, I'm going to go to Oculus Store and look at what people are commenting on the People's House, which is one of the things that they produce. And some people gave it 4 stars or 5 stars. They thought it was great. And then there were some people that had hardware issues that were completely unrelated to us, and they're like, I can't get it to run, 1 star. A couple of them changed their reviews based on the fact that we show that we're trying to fix this, and they're like, okay, fine. Well, I'll boost my rating. We'll give you, like 2 or 3 stars or something. And then there were those people that were like, yeah, it was a really great video, but I kind of hate President Obama, and Obama was in it, so I'm going to give it 1 star. How dare you make a video of the White House and include Obama? I don't want this propaganda. And so it's just, there's people like that, and they're like, okay, we can safely ignore you, that's fine. And then there's the all host collection of other tasks: administration, marketing, business negotiations, stuff like that. Business negotiations is an important one because the company does a lot of partnerships with other companies to produce this content, because it's not always cheap to make some of this stuff. So yeah, a lot of different job roles. Just to contextualize this a bit, film studios have, for a long time, have had these top 3 things. Well, very early film studios used to develop their own cameras. If you go way back in the history of film, sometimes people, when they were doing a production, they would actually do some camera construction work to get the kinds of cameras they needed. This was before the cameras were kind of standardized. And now, basically, every film studio in existence has some kind of post-production visual effects and the data pipeline and integration stuff to support that. This is kind of a new one for a film studio. This application software and engine development, the technology really comes from the games industry, because the technology you need to run this, it's real-time, it's 3D, there's very strict requirements on latency and responsiveness and that kind of thing. Like, it's got to be fast, it's got to be responsive, it's got to be 3D, and the people that have been doing that most successfully have been the games people. So we get some of these game engine-like technologies here, and a number of the people that the studio tries to attract are from games. Yes?
So your delivery productions aren't in a game engine, they're something different than that?
So this is one of those things that's back and forth. Since the beginning of the company, the code base was all custom built for a variety of reasons. One is we wanted to support a lot of platforms that were not necessarily supported by existing engines. And that's one of those questions. I mean, depending on what our future needs are, we may have to reevaluate that question about whether there's something that we need that it would be really makes more sense from a business or resources perspective to grab something from a third-party engine rather than do it ourselves. So far, we've been kind of doing it ourselves because there's issues with wanting to support all this hardware. The situation is getting better, so we may have to reevaluate that. So yeah, anyway, that's it. So maybe future incarnations of our application will be based on a third-party engine. It's not the case right now. So yeah. And so again, quality assurance, customer support, basically when I say, okay, this thing's great, it's ready to ship, they come back and tell me all the problems. and so it's kind of a safety check so we don't ship things with bugs in them, or at least too many bugs or bugs that are too bad. Yeah. Now, in an academic setting, I want to frame this here. It's the style of work is rather different, because in an academic setting, the standard seems to be, you go in and it's a very solitary type of pursuit, where you go in and you read a bunch of stuff and you work on a research project, and maybe you collaborate a bit with other people, but it's all kind of it's a very individualized kind of thing. And so here you have some administrative folks and support staff, well, lots of support staff depending on where you go around here. But I mean, one of the things that I actually like about being in a place like this is that there's actually all of this kind of thing all happening in the same place, and it can be kind of chaotic, but I sort of like it. So, screenshots. Boom, Space Explorers. Here's one of them. And so this is the main menu of Space Explorer. So you start up the application and you go and you see this. Right now we're looking at chapter 2. This is your little focal thing. And there's not a whole lot to say about this particular screen except as a transition. So here, we are transitioning into something visual. So here you go. One of the things that I mentioned that I worked on was localization and subtitles. So I'm particularly proud of this screen because I know everything that had to happen underneath in the code base to make something, to provide the functionality that's required here. And this gets back to the thing I had on the first slide with the RML, like the layout language that we use here. It was remarkably hard to support text in Chinese and text in Latin languages on the same, on the same screen, or be able to switch between them, because the library that we were using, the software library that we were using to display this stuff, was not really designed to handle. You have the same bit of text in the same location, but it could be rendered in one of two different fonts depending on what your language setting was. So trying to work my way through that, because I don't want to, there's this big question of well, how do you encode this? Well, the way you encode this is you have some kind, for each bit of text, you have some kind of tag somewhere that is related to these other bits of text in various languages. So you've got to select the right translations for each of these tags. And you've got to do that at runtime. And what I ended up having to do to get the Chinese stuff to render here was be a little bit sneaky, because we had these awful edge cases where the same bit of text could have both Chinese and Latin characters in it, and how in the world do you display that? Because you have to change font in the middle. And so what I ended up having to do is I'm like, well, we want to do this in a way that doesn't require a tremendous amount of work by programmers to update every single time you have to do anything. So what I had to do was go in there and say, well, all right, we're going to pull in the string. We're going to translate it, which means looking up the right file, pulling the right bit of text, and go through that string character by character. Look at what all the character, decode every character. Look at all the character code and say, well, are we going to assume that this character is from the Chinese font set or from the Latin font set? And every time it switches, insert in that string these HTML-like tags to actually change the style class that we're working on, and the style class will then map to a font family, and then that font family is going to be able to select which font we were using. This gets really exciting when you also think about, well, some of this text has to be italicized, some places, but Chinese, I found out that italicized Chinese is not really a thing. So it's got to account for that too. So you can't You've got to be able to automatically italicize sometimes the Latin characters when you want them to, and not italicize the Chinese ones, but you're pulling from a different font file. Yes?
Why do you need to work with fonts instead of, say, having some kind of like PNG file for each subtitle that you can just resize and flip out of the database?
Yes, thank you for asking that. That is a superb question. Because when you have, say, right now we don't have a huge text database, but once you add up all the bits of text, it ends up being probably well over 100 little bits of text that you want to be able to localize in 5 different languages. And everything every project you release may have a different font attached to it. You're suddenly looking at, okay, we want to release a new project. Now we have to go and say, oh yes, my dear graphic artist, we need you to produce 500 images that we now have to package and select between here. The scale of it.
Choosing where you do the work, I guess.
Choosing where you do the work,
Yeah.
and that is one of the hardest and also rewarding parts of my job is when I can get find the solution that when you globally look at how much work it's going to take everybody to do this, find something that's going to forge kind of a happy medium, a happy balance, where nobody is doing an insane amount of work for something that really shouldn't be. So yes. Anyway, yes, I know. I know. So here's the thing. Some people look at something like this. Oh yeah, it's just a few buttons and text. We're familiar with that. And in their minds, they think, oh, this is easy. Why do they think this is easy? They think this is easy because the web browser people have already spent millions of dollars solving it. And they compare it to a web browser, and a web browser already does all this stuff under the covers for you. And they're like, oh, well, it's simple. You just put a button. I'm like, well, our software user interface library is really not that great. So, a lot of stuff you're used to doing, we really can't do very easily. And oh yeah, it gets even more exciting when you have a requirement like, oh yeah, the text we want on this is this particular font, but we want to insert some horizontal space between each of the letters. So just insert some spaces. Or, capitalize everything. And how do you do that without making like a dozen different variants on every single string that you do? And one of the tricks I had to come up with was to figure out, as I'm scanning through these texts to choose the correct font, can I do a transformation on each character too? So where I replace each character with another character or set of characters based on some tag or setting that I have somewhere, and so the output string can be vastly different based on what I have set and what styles and tags are in effect. So anyway, that's part of what I did. So anyway, moving on. So this nice shot is from Space Explorers Episode 2. You can go and view this in VR. It's available in the Oculus Store. What we see here is a nice shot of the Soyuz space capsule, which by the way is currently the only piece of technology that we have that's able to carry people into outer space. We used to have more, but they're gone now. Right now you want to go into outer space, you got to get into one of those things, and they put that on the Soyuz rocket and get into orbit. So fun facts. Anyway, what I want to talk about here is subtitles. More nasty Nada problems. One of the issues with the subtitles here is in 2D this is fine. Subtitles in 2D are easy. You just have this frame and you say, okay, we'll just slap some text on here, it'll be great. You just pick your language, that's fine. Problem in virtual reality. You put on the headset, and what does it mean for the subtitles to be on top of something? The text has to exist in a 3D space. So you're looking at the scene, the text has to be somewhere, like at a certain position and a certain depth. So how do you decide where that should be? Yes.
Does it follow your point of view as if it's a heads-up display and it's relevant to what you're hearing? So maybe someone behind you says, "Duck, man," and you read the words "duck, man," and then you turn around and see who is saying it?
So what you'll see, what you'll see is this is one of those things where we've gone back and forth on these issues because it's one of those things again where there's no perfect solution. You've just got to kind of find something that more or less works and doesn't break too badly. What you'll see right now when you go and view this is it follows your gaze when you turn like this. But we decided to have it at a fixed height horizontally, so it stays here if you look up or down. Because I initially had it to where it would follow your gaze always vertically too. The problem was is that it's always sort of downward in your view, so you always had to kind of look down at the text because it was never like right in front of you. You know what I mean? So there's a kind of eye strain issue there. The more complicated problem actually is there's some scenes in this video where you have people or objects that are very close to you. So what happens when you have a subtitle that's out here and an object here and you look this way? What do you think happens?
Cognitive dissonance and gives you a headache after a while or something?
Yeah, it becomes very hard to focus on the subtitles because as it turns out, currently, the subtitles are rendered on top of the video, but stereoscopically the depth is behind, so it's very hard to look at, depending on how the difference in depth. It gets very, very hard to focus on them. So we had all of these questions about what in the world can we possibly do. So I actually implemented a system that had to go and talk with some of the folks in another department and to be able to extract from the video an estimate of what the depth actually is based on the pixel disparity. Because if you have two images, a left and a right, there's going to be a certain distance in pixels. And the larger that distance is, the closer the object is to you. So you can convert that approximately to a depth, and we can pull those depths out of post-production. So that stuff ends up going through some of the pipeline tools, and it gets encoded into a file. Then in the application, we've got to ingest that file, store all those, and then pick based on your orientation what the depth at the position you're looking at is likely to be. And what I originally did was just change the depth of the subtitles to always be in front of whatever you were looking at. Now you can't do that instantaneously, because if you say turn to an object that's close to you and have it suddenly jump in front, that's going to be hard to look at. So I had a nice smooth transition, but still the effect was really, really weird, because when I look at something far away, the subtitles would, even though visually they occupied exactly the same amount of space no matter where you looked, they looked like they've got farther away and larger when you look at something in the distance, or when there's something close, it looks like it gets really close and small, like they're little things like right there. In the end, they decided that kind of effect wasn't going to work for them. So there were talks about turning that into, well, can we fade the subtitle, use that information to fade the subtitles out when we go? So just all kinds of problems, and we're still not entirely happy with the solution. It's a work in progress. So there you go. Subtitles. There. Here's a nice, pretty picture. So. Here we have a very pretty picture of the International Space Station floating above a flat Earth. Really, it's a real photo. Earth is flat. Well, okay. So this is a wraparound image. So the way you would have, I mean, you've seen this in a flat map of the Earth, where you get this stretching out and distortion at the poles. Like, you can't map a sphere, 360-degree thing in a sort of a rectangular way. You have to flatten it somehow. Yeah, speaking of flat Earth, sorry, tangent. Not that long ago, there was a news story about a guy in the United States who he was pretty sure the Earth was flat. I mean, this sounds apocryphal, but this was real. This was really a guy in the news story. So he thought the Earth was flat, and so he decided that what he was going to do is he was going to himself build a rocket, fly up, and see for himself whether or not the Earth was in fact flat. So that was his hobby project for better part of a decade, and he managed to do that, and the attempt almost killed him. Because it's not until you actually start building a rocket until you find out very quickly that rocket is trying everything it can to kill you. He ended up getting up to over a kilometer in the air in this rocket, and then got in some serious trouble because he didn't have the proper permits to be up in the air, especially not with something like that. But I look at that. I mean, it's humorous, but I kind of enjoy the dedication of that. Like somebody who has this huge side project for over a decade to build this rocket and fly up and see for himself.
When it crashes, it sure seems flat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure. The Earth is locally flat, so yes, it sure does look that way. So I admire the drive. I admire the drive. I wouldn't recommend doing something that dangerous for yourself, but I admire the drive. I also admire Elon Musk's drive. That guy is ambitious, man. I'm kind of a fan of his SpaceX stuff, and he does make an appearance in the SpaceX rocket makes an appearance in this video, not Musk himself. Me, I'm a bit on the fence about that level of drive, because I like to do things like have kids, and I like to sleep at night, so I'm a bit standoffish. So I admire the drive. I'm just thinking to myself now, how much drive can I have between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we'll see. That's also a work in progress. So anyway, end of digression. So here we go. All right, this is what we're used to seeing. Same picture, but we're looking at a particular angle, a particular point of view, and it's cropped in. Okay, now this looks the way we expect, and the Earth looks round, and there we go. So you see what we have here. We're looking at about this point of view here, and this panel here is actually facing this one over here, and you can imagine the wraparound thing. You understand the wraparound stuff. Yeah. Moving on. So I told you what I did. Here is, in my opinion, what I really do every day. I diagnose problems, I infer intents, and I produce definitions. Let me explain this. Diagnosing problems.